do now is to talk about the project, how to scope a project. By scoping, I mean how do I get the project of the right size that'll be useful for us going through to work on this class together. And so to remind you, the project is basically do something innovative, but do it. And so the idea here is that if we go through the entire innovation process, and I'll show you the process in a moment, if we go through the entire process, that is, we go from idea generation to the stage of idea assessment, to concept selection, and then we go to refinement, because it never works the first time. We're then going to go to concept implementation. If we go through this entire process from there to there, which is what I would call the innovation process, we will actually have learned something. So if we choose a project where we can only have ideas or where we can only choose the concept but not actually go through the rest of the process, we're going to leave some of the learning on the table. That is, we're not going to learn as much as we might. And so again, the idea here is to do something innovative, but do it, to implement your project. And so that means we're going to necessarily put some constraints on the kind of project that's going to work for us. The project stages as we work through, we're going to start with a design stage, the design brief that is sort of saying this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and that's where we are right now. I'll keep coming back to this process document here and showing you where we are so that you'll know how to talk about the behavior that's required then. So basically this is showing a set of behaviors of what you need to do. First you design brief, then you do idea generation, then we will do some constraint analysis, and go on through and go on through and go on through. The class innovation project, teams will consist of this many people. Ideally, you'll have a client, and the client will be the person for whom you're innovating. And that person, if they're not a member of the team, it might be a little bit easier. But if you can't find someone, then certainly have it be a member of the team. But ideally, it's not a member of the team. You have to be able to work with this person, and so it has to be actually someone that you can actually interact with. So it's not someone you'd love to have as a client. It's not someone way up there in your organization. It really does need to be someone that you can actually work with. Remember, you have to implement your innovation. You have to choose something to actually do. And also, you're going to document your process, because at the end, what we'd like to do is be able to say, I went through these steps, and this was the outcome. How did that happen? What worked? What didn't work? And so if I've documented my process, I can actually come back to it later and redo it and understand again which parts I need to change in order to make it better. Also, I know which parts I don't need to change because they worked pretty well the first time. So the project conditions, the best project conditions, the project is small in size because we don't have very much time. We have very little time. 8 weeks is a short amount of time, considering that you're learning and doing all this stuff at the same time. Projects that are best projects have low resource conditions requirements. They don't need a lot of time. They don't need a lot of money. They don't need a lot of stuff, a lot of material, a lot of anything. They're projects where all members are committed, that everyone on the team wants to do this project. They want to make this thing happen. They all have some investment in the success of it. You want one where success can be measured so that at the end you can say, did we do it or did we not do it? If success can be measured, you can say, we said we would increase sales by 3%. Was it 3% or was it 2.5%? And by being able to measure it, you'll be able to know how good you were at the process. Projects should not require invention. This is not a class in technical invention, not a class in product development. And so anything you do should not require an invention. That's going to be too difficult. And so let's stick to things that are more process things or more changes in behavior, let's call them. Also, again, the project would have an available client. So the person for whom you're innovating, you want to be able to interact with them. You want to be able to try things out. Say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And if they're available, they can give you feedback. If they're not available, it's very difficult to get feedback from them, in which case you'll only be innovating for yourself and not actually trying to make someone out there happy. So again, very little time, very little money, people are busy, coordination is going to be difficult. I assume that if you're half as busy as I am, that you're going to be very busy, and so it's hard to get people together, and so that becomes a constraint. And so if you can do things that don't require a whole lot of coordination, you're better off. And again, you're going to be learning new behaviors and learning new material as we go through. And so if I'm learning something and trying to do a process at the same time, I really have to choose a much simpler process in order to make it work, in order to be able to understand what it is I'm going through. And we know that quality takes time. It takes time to learn, and it takes time to get quality. And so if you do something simpler, you can actually get a quality outcome. You can feel good about doing something simple because you did it well. Whereas if you take a big complex project that you may think looks good, but you don't get it done, then you really haven't done very much. You haven't used your time to the best you could. Remember, it always takes longer and costs more than you planned. Always. And it's a fact of nature. It's a law of nature. It's going to cost more and take longer than planned. So if you start simple, you'll get somewhere better. So let me show you some recent, I'll talk you through some recent project examples that I've done in my classes, that I've done with companies, that I've done in workshops, done in seminars, and I'll just sort of give you a sense of the kind of project that actually makes sense. And all these were very successful projects. Some of them, they didn't work. They weren't actually able to solve the problem, but they learned a great deal from it. And it was about the right size problem, and what they realized was that there was some kind of constraint out in the world that they hadn't really accounted for. So, some projects, glass recycling at school. We do it at school, we've done it at work. Paper recycling happens all the time, but glass recycling doesn't happen because it's heavy, because there are rules about janitors even, about whether they can pick up glass or not. And so the glass recycling one was kind of interesting. Once they got into it, they realized it was a little bit harder than they thought, but they were able to be successful. Fix the stapler, the stapler where you hold paper together. It would jam, it would lack supplies, or it would disappear. That team tried to say, okay, well, let's just put a chain on it and we'll screw it to the wall. As soon as they tried to put that screw in the wall, all the facilities people came out and said, oh my God, you can't do that, you can't do that. Then they realized that the IT staff buys the staples, and the library system buys the staplers. And so all of a sudden there was some conflict around who gets to be in charge of these staples and staplers and things like that. So again, that's a hard one, even though it looks really simple on the surface, because you get this thing that looks so simple, you say, oh, why don't they just do something like that with that? Why don't they just screw it to the wall? And as soon as they tried that, they found out it was not that easy. Sign-up system for meeting rooms. It used to be that people would try to show up, whoever showed up to the meeting room first got to stay in there, but meeting rooms were often unused. So someone built a sign-in system. How could people go online and sign up for basically to be able to use the meeting room? Orientation for new employees. You've had orientation for new students as well, where people put together a program and then bring people through it on a trial run basis to make sure that the employees or the people who are new to a school, new to a city, get oriented, that they know where the things are that they need, that they also get a positive impression of the place. When we had classrooms, our classrooms have no windows, and for a long time they had no art. I guess that's because faculty, we want you to look at us. There's nothing else interesting out there, only look at us. I guess I'm guilty of that also. But what the team did was they wanted to purchase some art for the classrooms. Now here's a problem where they had no money. And so where were they going to come up with the money for it? And in fact, they got the facilities people to agree that the classrooms would be better with art in them. And then they were able to get it. It was even like in week 7, out of the 8 weeks, they were able to get that art put up on the wall. At least the first piece went up after 7 weeks. And so it was actually a really good thing. Restaurant rating guide. So here's one. There were international students who would come to the U.S. to go to school, and they weren't sure where to eat. All the food tasted kind of weird, and they weren't sure where it is. And so some other international students put together a food rating guide for the different kinds of food you might like if you're from South America, or if you're from Africa, or if you're from China, or if you're from Japan, or any other country, that the kind of food that you might like to eat at different restaurants around town. Outdoor informal seating, getting a bench. People would jaywalk. Jaywalking is a slang term for walking across a street where there's no crosswalk. There's no light. Maybe there's light on this side over here, there's a light over there, a stoplight, but they walk across the middle where they're not supposed to. We call that jaywalking. And so it's a very dangerous thing, and so we were worried that students would get hit from our school. That's a problem. And so they tried to figure out ways of stopping people from jaywalking. That project was difficult. It was not completely successful. They did stop the number of people from jaywalking, but they did not completely stop the jaywalking. There have been projects to improve the school's rankings, to move the school up in the rankings, to make it feel like it's a better. There have been projects to move the schools up in ranking, to try to improve it. And actually that's been very successful. We're really highly ranked now as a school of Vanderbilt. Graduate School of Management is great. Information sharing on monitors. When you come into our building, there's lots of monitors up, but they didn't have any good information on them, or at least information that the students thought was relevant, and so they did a project to get better information up there. Printer paper, there was free printing for a long time, and there was an observation that lots of paper gets wasted if it's free printing, and so they wanted to start charging people for that. That was a difficult one. That one didn't get completely solved in the way they wanted to, because the idea of charging people for something that was free before was really difficult for people to swallow. And that was interesting to the students to sort of see how deeply held the feelings were about giving free paper. But then a separate team a year later did a project on printer paper use reduction, so using less papers. At least if we're not going to charge for it, let's get people to use less paper. And again, the idea is that if people pay for it, they're going to waste less of it. Better technology use in the classroom. We have classrooms with lots of technology in them, and people were not very good at it, especially a lot of faculty were not super good at using the technology, so they built little cards, in which with all the instructions on there, they tried the cards out with different people, they changed the language in a way to get people to use that. You may be in an organization with meeting rooms with lots of technology. So how is it that you help people understand how to use the technology? Why do people not video conference as often as they might? Maybe they don't know how to use a system. Some almost like consulting projects, innovation projects. Get a small business, two-person business is trying to advertise and they weren't really sure how to do it, how do they use Google AdWords. So the team put together a process for this small organization to be able to advertise better. Another similar one, there's an after-school program. So when the kids finish school in the United States at 3 o'clock, between 3 o'clock and when the parents come home, maybe it's 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock, kids are in an after-school program where they're reading and doing different things. The after-school programs don't have very many they're not funded very well, and so helping them find more resources was a project. How do they find more things? More different sources of income, more different ways of bringing things, getting donated computers, getting better chairs, getting students to volunteer there. Another project. Another project, add solar charging to the Larking Pot. No, actually it's the parking lot. The parking lot, this was a small arts organization, and they wanted to show that they cared about the environment, and so they were going to put solar charging in their parking lot. And this one was successful. It took a little bit, but it was successful. And sort of one problem here is how do we get people to pay money for something like this? It pays off for itself, because if you're not paying electricity to light the parking lot, that's money you save, but it's money that you have to use now. And when funds are tight now, people don't want to give up money for things that they know that even in the future it may pay off, but that right now is when they need the money. Creating an exhibit for a children's museum. So at a children's museum, there's always an adult that brings a child there, and adults maybe are bored. They're not sure what to do. They don't know what to do with themselves. And so here was an idea to create a set of experiences, something for adults to do when they take their children to the children's museum. And a number of times where teams have worked on idea generation assessment, basically innovation processes for their firms. We've done it for schools, we've done it for companies, we've done it for nonprofits. In lots of places they say, if we come up with innovative ideas, what do we do with them? Where do they go? How do we deal with them? And no one really knew in the organization, so we put together these systems, or these teams would put together systems that would help people understand better how to innovate and what the role of innovation was going to be in their company. Parking problem, probably all organizations have parking problems of one sort or another. If it's not cars, it's bicycles, if it's not bicycles, it's something else. How do you fix those things? And coming up with innovative ways to do that. Maybe two organizations to share a parking lot. That was one arts organization came up with that idea. Improving queuing at a stadium. So basically there's a food service. You go to a soccer game or a football game or a basketball game. And during the breaks, so all these people stand in line, and it sort of blocks traffic. So how do you get people actually to stand in line in ways that actually make it more efficient, but also without spending money to do it? So they didn't want to buy lots of bars and handrails and all those things. How do you do it with very little money? Also, organizations, especially if you're a performing arts organization or a nonprofit that does those kind of things, attracting more audience or attracting more customers. And the idea here is not just to sort of get some incremental way, the way that you currently do it, but say, how do we do it differently? We would normally get more audience in this way, but let's think about some other different ways that we have never thought of to do this. And that would be, I think, the time we have, that kind of project could be something that you could start, you could get some ideas about, you could test it out, and you could sort of see by the end, is this working or not? And that would be perfect for us to help with the learning that you could have with that. Like I said, new sources of income. Not the same way of growing, but what are the new ways we might grow as an organization? New meeting norms in organizations. So in your organization, if people tend to not have very good meetings or not have very good brainstorm meetings, how can you change the norms around that? Some organizations have been interested in how do we stop people from criticizing, others in how do we make better decisions in our organization. And so here's teaching some behaviors and teaching some new norms to people. And so how do we do that? How do we get people to do the new behavior, the better behavior than before? We've seen idea sharing, that people wanted to do better idea sharing. And so this goes sort of in line with the innovation process. But again, here we have a big organization, and people way in this part of the organization don't know much about what people over there do. So how do we help idea sharing across the organization? Very recently, we have a team working on a mobile app maintenance system. And so here, the idea is that the mobile applications are created by students, and they are great when they're done, but then after a time the students leave because they graduate and they go on to bigger and better things, and we're left with the application as a school. Like, how do we deal with that? What do we do? How do we maintain it? You know, where does the money go? How do we think about that kind of thing? And another one that was especially close to my heart was this innovation resource, innovation course resource. So to put this class together, I've had a lot of help from a lot of people, and so some of those people were in the class when I did it in the fall, in the face-to-face class, and they helped me create a lot of innovation resources. People like Rufus and Brad and Guy and Ben and everyone else who helped with that. And so these are the kind of projects, I think in general, the kind of projects that we can use to explore the question of innovation, to make the world a little bit better of a place. And so we're not trying to make something big and gigantic. We're just trying to do something that's small enough that we can learn from it, and that we can sort of understand what we did, and if it works, why it worked, and if it doesn't work, why it didn't work. And so again, we're trying to get to implementation. It's okay if you get to the end and it didn't work, as long as you got to the end. That's what's important. So again, it's about implementation. All right, so that's it for this tip. We'll see you next week with another tip on how to do the 101 ideas and moving that thing forward as well.